knew it all, to point out and says, are you interested in science? Because I see you have a good background. And you should try this and you try that. And that guidance lit my fire. And I said, first of all, because you had, some affirmation from a person of authority, and then for them to take their own time out. I remember teachers that would come in a half hour early or stay a half hour late and say, hey, afterwards, if you want me to show you this or show me that. And that is what got me going. But sitting there, I didn't really, I didn't like the process of sitting at a desk and being kind of preached to. I liked some of the alternative ways, and I'm going to throw some age out here, I guess, but they had the SRA and those color-coded programs that you used to go through. And if you can get the olive before everyone else, it was an incentive to go forward. And when teachers can identify in their students what type of talent they may have and then push them forward, I had a negative experience around the high school area where they have the guidance counselors that are supposed to help you and tell you where to go. And I had a young lady, pull me into the office and said, you hadn't picked out what you wanted to be. And I always wanted to be a medical doctor. And my mother was an LPN nurse, and so she had all her medical books around. And as you were saying, when the adults when they would have their parties and have their drinks, my father would come and say, it was almost like a show. He said, you want to see something? And out of all the other kids who had to go to bed, I could stay up. Why? Because he would pull out a medical book and said, read this. And they were like, he can read that? I was like 5 years old reading these things. And so I had a nice background in anatomy and physiology. So when it came to seeing the guidance counselor, she goes, no, medicine's probably not good for you. She goes, have you ever thought about mortuary science? It's the same thing, but go to LaGuardia Community College and you'll get a 2-year degree and you can be a funeral director. And that's what I actually ended up doing.
Wow.
Always knowing in my mind that I wanted to go back and get a graduate degree. So I took 10 years off, and I actually was accomplished, opened a funeral home, was good at that. But medicine still, it was in the back of my mind. I knew I wanted to get a graduate degree. Went to Queens College at nighttime while running my funeral home. Got into St. John's, finished with the bachelor degree in International Criminal Justice and Funeral Service Administration. And then I started thinking about, well, what about law school? And no one stopped telling me no anymore. Right. And so I went and got the book. And I read it, and still no one stopped me anymore. So I showed up for the entrance exam, did okay, was a 4.0, and I got an acceptance letter. And I was like, is that easy? And I remember I had to kind of take away all the years of you can't do this, or this is not for you. So I was my biggest enemy and my biggest holdback. And so I think it's important today that young people from whatever structure they have, but especially teachers, are able to identify these students because you light those fires.
It's that expectation piece, right? I think our young folks today get a bad rap, in terms of how we think they value education. But so many of them have not been introduced to education as a viable, option for them. And it's not that they don't want to learn, right? Because they implicitly want to learn, right? Particularly if they're growing up in urban areas where they just always need information just to be able to navigate, the neighborhoods. And so it gets to 2 points, right? They're taught in situations because of the testing where they don't see any value, right? They understand that it's a dead end, right? They implicitly, and then they have teachers who don't hold any kind of higher expectation for them at all. And we keep thinking that the kids are dumb. No, the kids are smart enough to know that you don't really have my best interest in mind. Right. You don't really care about me. It doesn't matter to you, whether or not I am ambitious, right? So why should I produce in these settings where you're not going to find any value in the work that I do?
Listen, man, there's so much in what you guys all shared. So I was a New York City public school teacher for 10 plus years. And even today, when I conduct research, I do my research in schools. I always tell folks, I write my best articles sitting in the back of a classroom because I get to not write from a perspective of an academic, but more from a person who's in the trenches, who understands the responses. So I literally go into schools to write my papers, just so I can get that energy. And so being in those spaces and sort of also thinking about, what I did for a career for 10 plus years, I realized a couple of things. One is this: there's no space within the existing curriculum for folks to be able to hear different narratives about the possibilities for young people. So when I look at 3 of you guys, you tell a story and a tale that is powerful about the power of black exceptionalism. This idea that despite the fact that the structures in place do not allow me to be successful, I will find a way. I will read that book. I will get that degree. And that story, within a confined curriculum, there's no space for a teacher to be able to tell a story about a person like you.
Right.
And so with the absence of a structure that allows that to happen, we won't hear it. You talk about the fact that you were able to sit there and watch your mom go to college.
Right.
And that motivated you to go to college. That's another piece, a strong piece of the existent black narrative. There are many young people of color who learn to go to college by seeing their mom go to college. And again, within the curriculum, there's no space for us to be able to tell these different stories. And so when you think about the existent narrative about success in college, it is, I go to school, I learn. If I learn well enough, I get my diploma. Then I go to college, then I graduate. But that narrative it's a white middle class narrative.
Right.
And so that white middle class narrative does not tell a tale of black exceptionalism. Does not tell a tale of watching your mom go to college. You know, does not tell a tale of you trying to figure it out on your own.
Or the historical value that black communities have
Always
had for
had-
education.
yes.
And it's still there.
Yeah.
It is still there, right?
Yeah.
Very often parents are challenged in terms of how they're dealing with these institutions,
Yeah.
but that value is still there. When
Yeah.
their babies are born, they're still thinking education is going to be
Yeah.
the root. Because I wasn't able to take advantage of it, right? But I knew someone who did,
Yeah.
right? And I respect that person, and that's still going to be an option for you.
But so my idea here is that at this point, and because we just playing out these ideas. I've always been playing with this idea. You remember we had the Occupy Wall Street?
Right.
Everybody was out on Wall Street bugging out, talking about, listen, we're gonna break down this financial system one way or the other. And I think that the answer for today is this notion of just going back and reoccupying schools.
Occupying the classroom.
You know, because an occupying a classroom, make your presence felt, be there, show up, sit in the back of the class, because the structure of the school in itself will not allow these stories to be told. And the only way we can tell them stories is if we go in there and tell those stories to our young people.
And I'm gonna tell you, being in the classroom, I never thought that I would be teaching elementary kids. But the second day I was at work, a student came to me like, Mr. Brown, I want to be just like you.
Yeah, right.
I'm like, what do you want to do? He said, I want to write books and I want to be a teacher. A staff that same day came to me, it was on a Friday, I never forget it. I dress very professional when I go to work. It's fourth grade, so he said, why do you always dress up like this? And I'm like, they need to see us like this.
Right.
It's not just church or court, you know, or you know, weddings. These children, like going back to the classroom, I swear, like everything happens for a reason, but I know that our students, our youth need to see us more in their lives. You know, I had a meeting with the men by themselves, the young men. I had a meeting with all the boys. There's only 6 girls in my class that I'm teaching and 21 boys. Never seen this. I'm always seeing that we're outnumbered by women and everywhere I go. I asked the female teacher I co-teach with, I said, can you take the ladies out of the classroom? I want to discuss something with these young men. I told them how important it was for the men to take charge, but to allow the women to know their parts as well, because they are 50-50 with it. So I see them assisting the female teachers like, oh, I can carry this for you. Oh, don't pick this chair up, I'll do it for you. They're emulating what I'm telling them. They do listen. It's approach. You know, education is very important, but it's not going to mean anything to them if they don't see the connection or relate to it.
You have to see a man to be a man.
Yeah.
And when you do that, and you're able to pretty much look at people for one who care enough about you, okay, and that is not necessarily always the math teacher or whatever. It could be that coach.
Custodian.
You know, it could be the custodian, someone that just sees you all the time, and it's so, for each person it's unique and it's random. When that spark is lit, and then once, as you know, when you light a fire, you got to keep it going. And if there are enough people around and there's a structure there, because people want structure, and that's some of the problems you have today with as we call them latchkey kids. They never see the parents. They're at home, and so. Back in my day, I had something called the World Book Encyclopedia. I don't know if y'all heard of that.
I had Britannica.
There was no internet. There was no Xbox.
Google.
And if you really needed something more, and I remember my mother struggled to pay for those books.
Encyclopedias,
We would get a book come in once a month or whenever she could afford it, and you would get the books that would come in. But when you really wanted to step up, you took a trip down to a place called the public library. And there was no computer there either, except for the one that checked the books out. They had that little pen that they scared, but you had the file that you had to look and then go look for the book. And when you found that book, it was like you found the diamond in the rough, because you grabbed it and you proudly walked up to the front desk. I'm taking this book out, and that was part of the excitement. So it's the process. So education is very important. It is a key a lot of times to get us to the door. Young people, a lot of people think that, you know, once you get that piece of paper, you've made it. No, that's the key to be able to get in the door, to sit at the table, to be able to then start your real learning.
Yeah.
So I'll be remiss if I didn't do this, just to say a couple of things. And I'm gonna push, because that's the purpose of the conversation, that we push each other a little bit, right? I think that it's very important that as we talk about in the world of education, this focus on men and black masculinity, that we also realize that we have to sort of recreate and reestablish a narrative about the powerful role and the strong role that black women play as well. And so, like, you know, so as we pull those young men out, and we focus on what it is to be a boy and what it means, and I think it's also important, this is a flaw that we all have, you know, when a kid is in the 4th grade, you don't teach him to be a man, you teach him to be a boy. Because when you teach him to be a man at that point, then you're putting things on him that he's not prepared for, and you don't allow him to grow. And so you have to teach him to be a boy, to be curious, and to be weak, and to cry, and to be vulnerable. And then teach him concurrently how to know that the girl in that class is a sister and a partner in that process, and that we work towards this path together. And I think, again, when we talk about education again, you know, the structures in place doesn't allow us to do all this powerful stuff that we're talking about. It's just, you know.
I'm glad you stated that. You know, that was very important.